Good afternoon and good morning. I am delighted to welcome you to our second of two fireside chats. This is Achieving Diversity and Inclusion, Cultural Change in Research and Innovation. As I mentioned, this is our second of a two-part virtual fireside chat. And today we will be focusing on sustaining change for DEI or EDI if you're depending on what part of the country you're joining us from. I am delighted to be joined by two phenomenal colleagues today. First, I'll introduce myself quickly. My name is Travis York. I serve as the Director of Inclusive STEM Ecosystems for Equity and Diversity, which we call ISEED. It's a little bit of a mouthful here at the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And as I mentioned, I am delighted to be joined by two colleagues who I'm just really excited to get to learn from today and to get to hear their thoughts on how we sustain change for EDI. Both of them have been at this work for a good portion of their careers, and I think have some really insightful things to share with us today. So I'm delightful to introduce Dr. Kimberly Griffin, who is the Associate Dean of Graduate Studies and Faculty Affairs at the University of Maryland. We are also joined by Dr. Hayaatun Sillem, CBE, who's the CEO of the Royal Academy of Engineering and Queen Elizabeth's Prize for Engineering Foundation. Both of these panelists have incredible CVs and bios, so I encourage you to check out their information if you have not already done so. Their accomplishments are truly inspiring. I am happy to be able to chat with them and to get to know them better. I want to thank both of you, Kimberly, Hayaatun. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real privilege to get to chat with you, and we value your time and your expertise. So thank you again. To kick us off today, we are going to begin with a scene setting video from our partners at 3M. And we hope that this video will kind of inspire some of our conversation today. So it should be coming up on our video in just a moment. Thank you to our incredible back team.
There's a stereotype of scientists. One, that they're male, and they're boring, they don't dress well, and they're like very awkward. I'm obviously not that type. You know, I'm a Latina woman, so I've got that Latina passion. I'm a person of faith. I sing, I dance, I love clothes. I'm not your typical scientist. And I always knew that being true to myself, being true to what drives me, was going to be the key to a successful and satisfying career.
Y el tupper bajón es como una hojita y le ponía como té.
My name is Dr. Jessica Taaffe. I'm a microbiologist by training, and I have used my PhD in microbiology and my experience studying infectious diseases like HIV and malaria to apply that in the world of global health, which is really important in everybody's lives. And I especially feel this now with COVID. I grew up in the United States. I was born here. My mom is Paraguayan.
Y yo estoy orgullosa de ti, Jessica. Muy orgullosa.
The Latin culture definitely plays into who I am and how I grew up. There's just this love of life. And family is so important to us. My dad's side, he's your typical WASP, I guess, you know, Caucasian. He's a forester. You know, that played into my childhood in a way that, you know, we were out in nature. We always learned about science. Both of them encouraged not just us experiencing science, but other subjects like music and art. My mom has this funny story about me. She says, I always knew you were going to be a scientist because you used to mix all of my perfumes. I always had this interest in the biology of infectious diseases, but also really wanted to be involved in global health and apply my scientific expertise, my biomedical expertise in that arena. And the first roadblock was having people understand what type of career I wanted, because it was not your typical academic career, your typical research career. I couldn't really figure out how I was gonna live at the intersection of that. And that was incredibly frustrating because it was something that I wanted to do. Another roadblock was I felt like I had to tone down my personality in order to be respected. So for instance, the first months that I was doing my postdoc at the National Institutes of Health, I didn't wear my red lipstick because I didn't want people to focus on that and then not take me seriously. I wanted them to focus on my science first. I really shouldn't have done that. But yeah, because I didn't see a lot of people like me, I felt like I had to fit in the way that just wasn't really authentic to who I am. To do something that felt true to my passion and true to my professional mission, I had to find my community to help me figure this out. I sought out, what the global health community was. I found other people that understood the things that I was excited about and passionate about. I also met other people like myself and made friends with them and realized that there's a lot of diversity in science. There's a lot of other people like me. I feel like throughout my career, I've grown. I accept myself. And by not conforming, by staying true to myself, to my culture, to who I am, this gave me the confidence to pursue and make a path to my own type of career. I knew that I could use my scientific knowledge in the world of public health to make a difference in people's lives. And then, at some point, people started to notice that my points were valid. So I left the lab. I did a bunch of consulting in science in the global health arena, working for groups like the World Bank, United Nations, which was fantastic. Like, that was definitely the realm that I enjoy being in. It just clicks. You know you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. And that's what keeps me moving forward. When COVID hit, this was this huge realization of like, this is what I have been preparing for my entire life. This is why science is important to global health, right here, right now. So scientists swooped in. They went to sequence the virus to better understand it. Now, a year later, we've got people getting vaccines. Like, that's amazing. Scientists have been heroes in this pandemic, and it's been so exciting to see that play out. Everyone is going to remember this moment in time. They will remember having lived through COVID. I hope that the next generation of scientists get inspired by this moment and how important science is. I'm a new mom. I have this precious little baby girl. I hope she grows up in a world where she feels like she can do whatever she wants, where diversity in expression and personality and culture, all sorts of things, is celebrated, appreciated, tolerated. And I'd love that if she chose a career in science, she didn't feel stifled. She felt like she fit in and she could express her scientific self in whatever way she wanted. If you inspire a girl to go into a STEM career and show her the different ways that she can do what she loves, she can change the world.
I love that video with Dr. Jessica Taaffe, who's also one of our AAAS If Then ambassadors. I will turn it to our panelists right away for perhaps some initial, any initial thoughts about that video while it's fresh. Dr. Griffin, Dr. Sillem.
Hi, Travis. I'm happy to jump in first while Kimberly's unmuting. Just to say, I mean, how fantastic that we see so many more of these diverse images of what leaders in science and engineering look like. And certainly if I look back to when I was starting my career, that was not the case. So the more of these human stories we hear and the more diversity we present in terms of what leaders in our world look like, the better. And I also think it's an incredible thing that lots of us feel empowered and encouraged to speak out about our backstory, our hinterland. We don't only have to have that kind of acceptable face, you know. We can have the lab coat on, but we can also have our humanity underneath that.
Yeah, I mean, I will just dovetail on that. What a beautiful story and a representation of showing up as your full self and being your authentic self. I think when we think about science, sometimes we push forward the science identity and minimize the other parts of ourselves that might bring us to the work, that make us feel inspired to do the work. And one of the things I felt like I heard over and over again in the comments were that she didn't feel like a typical scientist or didn't see anybody who looked like her in terms of her identities, but even that was doing science in the ways that she wanted to do it.
Right.
And I think it just reinforces the importance of not only role models, right? Seeing someone who looks like you, but possibility models, seeing people who want to engage in the work the way that we want to engage in it. So it's super inspiring. Thank you so much for starting our conversation with it today.
Yeah, and thank you to our behind the scenes team who's running all of that great tech. Just in case anybody did have any difficulty seeing the video, Shirley did post a link to the video. It is available on YouTube, and that's actually one of five, I think it's five, it might be four, vignettes that are available around different ways to picture a scientist. So I encourage folks on the call to check those out on YouTube. They're freely available. So in today's session, we're really going to be discussing this idea of sustaining change as a long-term and adaptable endpoint. I'm hoping that today we might be able to get into some conversation around learning how to measure and embed these goals around equity, diversity, and inclusion, while recognizing that cultural change really requires continued, sustained effort. And this idea of us kind of really becoming comfortable with the idea that our goalposts may change, and that becoming inclusive and equitable isn't just some clearly defined endpoint, but that it is a practice. It's a way of being, a way of doing. And I know our panelists will have some great insights into that. So my first question for you two is to see if we can maybe just map the landscape a little bit here. I'm wondering if we can get a couple ideas out on the table. And I'm wondering what you two might think about as your top one or two challenges and opportunities that are in this conversation around sustaining systems change for DEI or EDI, depending on what continent we find ourselves on.
Shall I go?
Sure.
I'm taking notes to be able to say something thoughtful and smart. So go ahead.
Travis, we need direction, you know.
I will provide more.
We're too polite. So, okay, since I've started, let me carry on. So, yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, the opportunity is just tremendous, right? The opportunity for me is about transforming our sector research and innovation community so that we benefit from the full breadth and diversity of talent out there, so that we can in turn deliver benefits that arise from research and innovation that really do have meaning and impact for all of society, all swathes of society. And you know, that's the most incredible ROI, return on investment. That's a prize worth fighting for. So in terms of the challenges, see, I'm breaking your system already. I can't just do one or two, because I do agree with you. You know, diversity and achieving a diversity and inclusion it's a way of life. It's not you know, here are your three things, do those and Bob's your uncle. So I always think you know, there are some fundamental tenets. Like, there are 5 things I always say really matter if you want to get diversity and inclusion right, whatever right means. We can look into that. And they come down to leadership. Leadership's so important. So I hope we're going to talk about leadership, the business case, and I think in our world, actually, ensuring that we all have a real understanding, belief, and confidence to talk about why EDI or DEI is so fundamental to institutional success and research excellence. That's still something we've got work to do on. Thirdly, systematic and rigorous approaches to data and evidence. You'd think this would be a strong point in our community, but I think we've always got room for improvement. And then fourthly, practical tools and training. It's so important to make it easy for people to do the right thing, not to just assume that if your heart's in the right place, that's enough. And then lastly, but again, really importantly, we've got to have space for creative solutions, for self-disruption. You know, our history of what I would say is incremental change does not mean that we have to accept a future of incremental change as well, but that takes disruption, that takes creativity. I'll stop there. So hopefully, Kimberly, you're now good to go.
Yes, I am. Thank you so much for getting us started. And I promise I'll start the next time. I think the opportunity, just building on what Hayaatun already shared, is so vast. I always go back to the fact that there's established evidence that we are better when there are different folks in the room trying to solve problems. Like, this isn't even something that we should discuss anymore, that when we have different minds coming together, trying to solve and make progress on the tough, thorny problems that we need to tackle as a discipline, as a society, we need different voices. We need different perspectives in the room, and that we aren't going to make the progress that we need to make unless those folks are there. And I think that selling people on the importance of that has become less challenging over time as the evidence is built through scholarship, but also through our personal experiences, just knowing and acknowledging that we're better when we're able to collaborate with folks who just have a different perspective than our own. The challenges, I'd say the first is that when I think about academics generally and scientists in particular, we like to have the right answer to things, and that a lot of us were not trained to do this work. We don't know how to do this work. It is a constant learning process. It's a constant process of having to make mistakes and be wrong, and that can be really, really challenging and almost push against some of the cultural norms in the academy and in science, that we have to embrace the fact that we don't always know what we're doing and that we're going to be wrong a lot of the time. What better looks like in terms of inclusion is murky, that we don't have a clear picture of what better looks like. As I work with campuses, as I have conversations with folks about improving the culture of an environment or the climate of an environment, sometimes folks will be just like, well, can you point me to the institution that's done it really well so we can mirror that? How do we know when we've gotten there? And in addition to the, probably never will get there, sometimes a more inclusive or a more diverse environment feels a little bit less comfortable. And so embracing that, we don't exactly know what we're growing towards, but getting there ultimately will lend to some better outcomes is another thing that I really think about a lot. And then the final thing I think about as we move into these change efforts, sometimes we get too dichotomous in our strategies. We think about individual level inequality. We think about individual level acts of oppression or racism. And then we think about structural change and like, oh, we need to engage in structural change, and which one do we need to do? And really, we need to be engaging in both, and they're intimately related to each other. Individuals uphold systems, systems drive individual behavior, and we have to have tough conversations where individual and structural meet to really make progress. And that's difficult work. That's trust work. That's relational work. And I think, again, this is a skill set that we're all trying to learn together all at the same time.
Well, I could not have set the stage better, which is why I'm not a panelist, just the moderator. So thank you both for that. So there are several things here that I definitely want to dive into, including leadership, including this concept around disruptive innovation as a catalyst for sustained change. But I wonder if we start, Kimberly, right where you were in this linkage between the individual and the structural level. And it seems to me like there's two pieces to this. There's both getting people to buy in, which you've kind of mentioned that with the growing body of really clear body of evidence that more diverse groups, people from more diverse backgrounds and different ways of thinking about problems produce more innovative solutions that are better for greater swaths of the population, and usually innovate at more quick levels. So there's like a decrease in cycle time, there's an increase in productivity and application, and an increase in the quality of science done. So, but how do we get both that buy-in and also a sense of ownership in this problem, right? Because I think part of what you were describing is in the linkages is thinking about kind of how we garner this idea that like it's not too overwhelming and I do have a part to play. Thoughts from you first, and then I'll pass over
Sure.
to Hayaatun?
I'll definitely start. So I think it's easier to be on the side of pom-poms up. I'm excited about the innovation that will come when we bring different folks together into a room. And then encourage those folks with unique perspectives who may not be as present in the academy. We're going to help you figure out how to navigate this structure and system that we already have in place. So we want to benefit from you. Yes, please come, and you need to conform to this structure and system as it is, which is more in alignment with what is referred to as a diversity perspective.
Okay.
How do we help folks who are underrepresented and marginalized and minoritized navigate structures and systems as they are? Instead of shifting to a more equity-based perspective, where we understand that we have to do our work to make the environment more inclusive, that along with this large body of research that suggests individuals from different backgrounds are better at solving problems, the key linchpin to that is they have to feel welcome in that environment. They have to feel validated, included in that environment, because if they don't, that's when we see burnout and stress and disengagement and people leaving, and we just have this revolving door of we bring people in, they share their ideas, they don't feel welcome, they go. So really shifting from thinking about how do we support this person and ensure that they are buffered enough to navigate our structures and systems as they are, to looking to ourselves and taking responsibility for when individuals don't feel like they fit. How can we be more actively engaged in the work of creating more inclusive environments? And to your point about individual and structural, we have to be mindful that how people engage each other from day to day, how they think about each other, how they make each other feel welcome, is certainly something that we have to address. We have to be mindful about implicit bias and how that shows up in our behaviors. And that's hard and difficult work to do. But we can do implicit bias trainings from here until next week if we don't have a structure that recognizes talent in diverse ways. If we continue to perpetuate the same structures that we've already had, that individual implicit bias work isn't going to translate to any level of change. So while we're working with individuals, helping them understand what it means to have an inclusive work environment, we also have to be more broad in acknowledging the contributions of individuals in our structures and systems, and actually change policy and change the way that we reward individuals for creating an inclusive environment and also recognizing success and talent.
Dr. Sillem, I'm interested to hear your take on this, especially considering a UK context, which I've lived both in the majority of my life in the US, but I have lived for a small amount of time in the UK. And it seemed to me in my experience living there that there was less, now this was also in the mid 2000s, so I'll date myself a little bit, so I'm sure times have changed some to what, but it seemed also in the UK that because of some of the historical antecedents being very different than the US, where I think it's much harder for people to kind of turn a blind eye to the kind of structural pieces. It seems like there was more of a sense of our structures are inclusive in the UK and some of the environments I was in. And I wonder if this is a struggle at large, or perhaps just in the spaces I found myself.
That's really interesting, Travis. I think it's always useful to get a kind of outside-in perspective. And I guess my experience has been really predominantly working in the world of engineering, where we have such a diversity deficit in terms of gender, but also pretty much every diversity characteristic. So it's not the same set of challenges for each one. So I think we face the same fundamental challenges, whilst the context might vary a little bit. And I think that, you know, again, it's back to some sort of general truths. So systemic change is only possible when you get this resonance between institutional frameworks and policies and individual behavior. And so how do we do that? Well, you know, this isn't rocket science. this is kind of good leadership, good governance stuff. So, you know, one of the basic things is this idea of, if you define organizational success in a way that embeds positive EDI or DEI outcomes, you can then get the flow through into how does it feel for an individual. So you get those positive feedback loops. People feel rewarded in terms of, you know, that almost that dopamine hit from my positive contribution was recognized. So it can be as simple as, you know, we give values awards to colleagues who just do a great job of modeling our values, through to something formal in an appraisal process. There's a million different ways to do that, but that feeling of, oh, there's a positive. You're moving from fear to feel good, which is, I think, one of the struggles that we face with D&I sometimes. And so continuing on that theme, I think helping the majority groups to feel really empowered to be confidently part of this positive change is also part of that. So this is why I love inclusion. For many reasons I love inclusion, but inclusion is something that everyone can benefit from, everyone can contribute to. And you know, there's some great examples of allies programs where people feel empowered and positive about the contribution that they can make as someone with privilege to creating a better experience for everybody. And so being smart about those kinds of opportunities, I think, is very powerful. And then I think there's something else around group dynamics. So for my sins, I've spent way too much of my life sitting in meetings where I'm observing people making decisions. So I sit in all kinds of panels. And what you see is that actually one or two people can have a major influence on how the group behaves. And what I think is really, you know, interesting when you watch that is if there is some counterweight to those one or two people who may not be behaving in a way that's advancing your DEI objectives, then you can actually change a whole group behavior much more quickly than you think is possible. And shared accountability is often more effective than top-down accountability. So if you get that self-correction in a group, it's really, really effective. And so that again comes back to allies, towards people feeling confident that they know what good looks like and that they have permission to call it out if they're not comfortable. That culture of listening, learning, respect, that's all part of that. So this fear to feel good, I think, it might sound like a soundbite, but I've seen it work.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important. And it sounds to me too, like part of what you're advocating for is by using that kind of the positive reinforcement of people being engaged, we also lower the barrier of entry, right? For building kind of empathy for inclusion and diversity, and building kind of sense of, because so much of that is about feeling a little bit uncomfortable and being okay with being uncomfortable at times, it also allows some balance of also feeling positive in those spaces and feeling like the work matters. I wonder if either of you have other ideas for how we might lower that barrier for entry and kind of continue to build empathy for inclusion and equity in practical ways or in that personal way. Both of you have mentioned the kind of personal work that happens, and that is really important. In the social science literature, I've heard some people refer to this as shadow work. It's work that isn't necessarily what we talk about at panels. It's not necessarily what we are getting accolades for in our work right now, although I hear Dr. Sillem advocating that we should build those rewards into our actual structures as an equity mechanism. But it's oftentimes the work that we're doing around kind of challenging our own biases, expanding our own perspectives, right? What's the balance, or what's the mutually reinforcing aspect of both lowering those barriers and promoting that shadow work to encourage people to be in those spaces?
My first thought about those things, I was thinking about Hayaatun's comment about like just thinking about a meeting and how important it is to slow down our meetings sometimes and establish some of those norms. Like, this is how we're going to engage each other in a way that it's almost to be expected, right? That of course we're going to all be on the same playing field. And of course, everybody's going to have an opportunity to contribute. And of course, we're going to try to figure out a way to do it where one voice doesn't get centered and we all kind of norm towards that one voice, that, you know, everyone really does have space and that there's someone to facilitate that space. I think oftentimes in the course of the work that we do, we're trying to move so fast that it's really important to slow down and set the norms and ways that we're going to engage each other around these things. I think in terms of engaging in good shadow work and really being able to hold each other accountable in ways that call people in rather than calling people out, there's some work that we have to do around trust in our organizations and feeling like this is a place where I can make a mistake and have a conversation about it and not be held accountable, but not be shamed in that work. So how do you show up in a way where we're having conversations about the work? We all understand ourselves as works in progress, but I can ask a question about something that happened in a meeting that felt awkward. And I'm going to have an honest conversation with you about it, but I'm not going to shame you in that conversation. We're going to use it as an opportunity for growth and learning. So I think creating that trusting environment where folks feel like I can say something awkward, I can say that thing that's rumbling around in the back of my head that's really uncomfortable, that something feels wrong about it, but I'm going to say it anyway, and that it's going to be treated as a point of information that we can all engage around, that we can build around, and that, okay, maybe this is why I responded to this in this way, or this is why I kind of felt like that was wrong, or not in alignment with our values. I really like that wording a lot. Like, that's not necessarily the organization we're trying to be. How can we move forward from that place? How can I give you some anchors that help you develop a different understanding of the same thing? And I think if we're not in trusting environments where people can share those things, then we can't address them. They just become that thing that I thought in a meeting about, like, I don't know why we're engaging in this equity-based practice, or why do we care about the diversity contributions this person is making in a hiring decision? If you don't say it out loud, we can't address it, but we really have to do the work about being intentional about building trust with each other to get to that place.
I really agree with that, and Kimberly, I'm so glad you used the word shame, because I really think this is a barrier, right? So you know, bias is something that we're all embarrassed about, but we all have bias. So if we start from the assumption that bias is in all of us, and so when you are aware of a bias, that's great. Because, you know, it's a problem is when you're not aware of a bias. And so we all have bias, and we all make mistakes. So bias is really a function of our ability to make connections between disparate things. And our human brain is just phenomenal in that respect, but sometimes it makes connections that are false or even damaging. And that's something that if we expect to happen in our lives and recognize in ourselves, it's, you know, that humility that comes along with that is a really good starting point for how we grow empathy. So I think it's especially incumbent on leaders to show that we own our biases, and that we are not ashamed of that. We might feel really sorry if we've done something as a result of a bias that has in any way caused distress or harm, but we're not ashamed of admitting that we have bias in us. And then from there, I think, you know, as someone from multiple underrepresented groups, as I'm sure you can all relate to, it's as if somehow I have permission to say things that someone who doesn't have. This is silly, because empathy is something that we all have to continue to build. Empathy is not a God-given right, you know, like I have empathy because I'm from these groups. Doesn't work like that. You know, I can categorize myself, but those are just labels, and I am incredibly different from another woman with 2 kids and my ethnic background. You know, these are just buckets. We are not a collection of buckets. And so it should be an expectation that, particularly as leaders, we want to actively cultivate our empathy. So as you were indicating, Travis, things like, you know, reverse mentoring or creating spaces where we hear different voices are ways of doing that. But we can go further than that. And I'm always so frustrated that somehow, despite our incredible creativity in research and innovation, we haven't done more to use technology to grow our empathy. So, you know, more than a decade ago, we knew that if you were gaming using an avatar of somebody who had a different set of characteristics to you, it could actually change the way you felt, the way you empathized with people from those groups. And why is that not a tool that we have? I mean, there are some consultancies who are developing sort of next level unconscious bias training that is based around VR, but surely we can do better than this. I think it's almost like we didn't believe this was a thing that you could actively cultivate, but we can. So yeah, there you go, off my soapbox.
No, I love that. I'm so glad you brought that up too, this idea that like we can and should continue to develop the strategies, the evidence-based strategies that help us actually grow these psychosocial, these cognitive and psychosocial kind of pieces. And it is so interesting, right, to think about the social construction of so many of these identities, and yet also the power that they have when society and groups outside of ourselves are kind of imposing meaning or privileges or lack of privileges based upon those constructions. I would like to move us towards a conversation about leadership, just because it's come up in a couple different spots, and I do think this is really important. And I guess my question for you is, so in a lot of the research that I've been engaged in and work around kind of, in particular, catalyzing and sustaining change in institutions of higher education, we have found that senior leadership is vital for sustaining long-term change efforts, both in terms of resource allocation, because this takes real time and money and support, like real resources, but also in terms of culture shaping and the symbols and the expectations and the norms that leaders can produce, much like Hayaatun just mentioned around kind of the importance of a leader saying, I have bias, and me recognizing that bias and seeking to kind of take that as a given assumption enables me to combat that bias, right? So I have a two-part question for you. First, what strategies can be employed to help senior leaders understand and participate in that long-term change? So that's one question I'll float, and I'll give you the other one just so you can percolate on it. But my second is, what strategies do we employ to make this work more resilient in light of the reality that leaders transition and change? And so two-part question, what strategies do we employ to help senior leaders understand their role in that change? But also, how do we make this work somewhat change proof or transition proof for leaders?
I have a couple thoughts. I can start. So I'm lucky enough to be doing some outstanding work with Dr. Leslie Gonzalez at Michigan State University, and we're looking at campuses that are trying to undergo organizational change efforts to increase faculty diversity, particularly in science. And we're focusing on leaders and understanding how leaders kind of function in this work and how they're pushing change on their campuses. And we've learned some things from that work that I think really speak to the question that you just asked, Travis. So one of the things that we noticed is, I think when we think about leadership, particularly in the context of change, we think about someone who is just trying to push an agenda forward, right? Like, I'm pushing my agenda forward. I have to be motivated. I have to push, right? And we're learning that one of the things that seems really key to leadership and getting leaders to understand this is probably the first part of what's key to shifting change, is that it's not just pushing an agenda forward, it's willingness to understand and take ownership of a problem. So faculty diversity can manifest in so many different, it can come from so many different places, right? Like, you don't just have a faculty diversity problem. You might have a hiring problem, you might have a retention problem, you might have a culture problem, you might have a tenure and promotion problem. So having leaders really understand, well, I need to have a deeper understanding of where the problems are that are translating to the inequities that I see. That's the first piece. I think the second piece is that willingness to say, and this is our problem. There aren't problems out there. There's not an equity in STEM problem. There is a problem in our organization. There are issues in our organization that we are well positioned to address. And really just taking ownership of that problem speaks to the vulnerability that we've been talking about earlier, that it kind of shifts the perspective in terms of where and how the work gets done. And we think that that's really critically important. The second thing that I'll say in regards to your question about kind of sustaining change, and it not just being one person being a dynamic leader and we do this for a while and then it goes away, is that when organizations are able to make the connection between equity and justice work and their values as an institution or as an organization, embedding it in our mission, our vision, who we're trying to become, these are our values, and really making clear links between these goals and outcomes that we want to achieve, who we are as an institution, and tying tactics and metrics to those. So we're not just making progress on some diversity and equity and inclusion goals that are kind of untethered, that they are a fundamental part of who we are, and that ultimately our ability to become the organization we want to be is linked to this equity and justice work. That allows that momentum to be sustained over time.
Yeah, I'm happy to come off the back of that as well. I mean, I would love to think that anybody who sees himself as a senior leader in research and innovation recognizes that this is a non-negotiable component of what leadership means. But I wouldn't want us to leave that to chance, because honestly, if we look back at our history, it hasn't consistently been the case. And so there is a lot of public funding, government funding, that goes into research and innovation. And I can't really understand why this is not seen as a necessary component of being a good steward for that public funding. there are a lot of levers. There are many funders who think very hard about, what is their funding going to achieve? So why is it still up for discussion that EDI, DEI outcomes are a necessary component of that success? You have government policy, but you also have the governance piece on this. So I think that certainly in the UK, I can't speak to the US so much, but in the UK, the universities and the research community more generally have lagged behind the private sector. So in the majority of listed companies in the UK, you would see that diversity and inclusion as part of, say, ESG is a core part of good governance. Do you use the term ESG? But yeah, environmental social governance. So these are kind of like hallmarks of good governance. Like, you can't just say, well, the environment's lovely, but it's not really a priority anymore. We're past that point. And you've got shareholders, you've got investors. That there are lots of routes to ensuring that there's accountability there. I think there should be some equivalent in the context of the research community. So why is every board or every council of every university not saying, we don't want a leader who isn't going to help us make progress on this, because this is hygiene level now. This is necessary for us to be seen as a credible organization. And I think there's also the kind of accountability that comes to the students who inhabit that university, the best talent that wants to work with you. These are all the kind of aspects of business case that I think private sector employers get. If they want to be able to recruit and attract the best talent for the future, they are going to need to be able to present themselves as an inclusive employer. So for me, I want to go beyond reliance on individuals with good hearts. Say, sorry, this is now a fundamental tenet of what good looks like in research and innovation.
Yeah, that's so fascinating, and I do think that I think that's a commonality actually in the US and the UK kind of ecosystems, that there isn't just kind of pressure from within institutions for this change. I do think that industry partners and national labs and the such have really started to apply more and more pressure around workforce demands as this growing, kind of clear priority around thinking of diversity as an asset, as a business asset, has really been demonstrated. There's been, increased demand for a workforce that allows us to maintain that asset to the greatest extent possible. Mm-hmm. So we will be heading to audience Q&A in just a couple moments. So please feel free to post questions in the Q&A chat. Several of those are already coming in, and thank you to all of the folks that submitted questions ahead of time. We won't be able to get to all of the questions because you all provided lots of fantastic questions, but we will try to get to as many of them as possible. Before we head into audience questions, actually, no, I'm going to go ahead and transition into audience questions. I have one question I'm going to keep in my back pocket to perhaps kind of round us out towards the end of our time. So the first question that I actually have for you all from the audience is a question around measurement. And that is, to sustain change, we probably need to measure its progress. What important or novel recommendations do you have for a faculty equity dashboard that goes beyond headcounts? And I would maybe even extend that a little bit to how an industry leader might also think about kind of beyond headcounts of, is our workforce or is our faculty functionally or structurally, is how we would talk about this, structurally diverse? How is it actually inclusive? And Kimberly, you were starting to touch on this a little bit. So if you don't mind, I'll come to you first in terms of thinking about like just bringing a whole bunch of diverse people together doesn't make your institution equitable or inclusive. So I wonder, kind of from the measurement space, are there things that you would point to or that you would really kind of advocate that we pay attention to as proxies for the broader kind of inclusion categories?
Sure. So here in the US, there are many organizations, individuals who are willing to engage in climate assessment work with campuses, particular academic departments and programs. And what they do is oftentimes they're mixed methods assessments. They'll come in and get an understanding of what does it look like for folks in marginalized and minoritized populations to be engaging in an environment. How do they feel? Who are they engaging with? Who is being mentored by whom? Does everybody have equal access to the resources that they need to ultimately be successful in navigating an environment and thrive? I really recommend bringing in external folks to do this work. I think it's hard to look internally and do it, and it's a lot of work to make sense of. And I really think it's important to, yes, quantitative measures of climate, of environment, of sense of inclusion and how people feel are critically important, but also qualitative, having focus groups, having individual interviews with folks to really get a sense and an understanding of what it means and what it feels like to be in an environment can be really helpful. So I think doing that work on the front end and then doing it again to get a sense of how has the environment changed or shifted or progressing over time can be really, really helpful. Another thing that I think can be really helpful is looking at and thinking about the language we use to talk about some of the disparities that we might observe, or how we're thinking about approaching a problem. So while looking at faculty diversity data, for example, on a dashboard could be one indicator of progress, right? How we talk about those data and whether or not we're making progress on those data and where the problem is also could be an indication of how the department or the unit is changing. For me, it would be shifting, if we're talking about faculty diversity data, a shift from saying, well, this is a pipeline problem and we need to, it's not diverse enough in graduate education, so how are we going to have a diverse faculty? That is a very different conversation than, gosh, what are we doing that's not allowing us to yield candidates when we make them offers? What does our tenure and promotion data look like? Does everyone have an equal shot at navigating that process successfully? We brought in some folks last year. Are they being mentored? Are they being supported? That question, even identifying where the problem lies and that shift, to me would speak to progress. So thinking about how do we bring in external folks to help us do this work, right? Who are well-trained and well-equipped to do it, but also being mindful of not only does the environment look different, are we engaging each other differently, and does it feel different? Are we talking about equity and justice related issues differently instead of just always centering the numbers and diversity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really hear a change in your language there, just in kind of a focus on individuals traversing a system to also thinking about in what ways is the system itself supporting the pathways of individuals. And that allows for a greater, broader conversation of thinking about where you might input what we call kind of equity checks, right, within a system. So if our yield isn't producing what we intend it to be, is there an equity check, a systemic intervention, not just trying to say, well, we need to help people more navigate that system, but is there an actual system change that can be put in there? Hayaatun?
Yeah, just really quickly, as I think Kimberly gave a brilliant answer, just wherever, I believe in counting what you can and focusing on outcomes wherever you can as well. So perhaps less obvious things like, are you producing research or products that meet the needs of a wider population, a wider set of populations? How diverse are the teams of founders responsible for spin-outs? What's the diversity split of the people that you feature in your public facing communications? Things that are all routes to communicating what you're about and what's important and who's benefiting, and also just to say that that this is an area where not all the metrics available are perfect, and we just have to live with that. So using in the way that Kimberly's described, multiple kind of orthogonal approaches, using independent voices, because recognizing as well it's hard for everyone internally to necessarily feel uninhibited in sharing their views if it's all done by a home team. Those are all great things to do, and let's not get hung up by the fact that there is no perfect set of metrics that will give you everything you need.
Right. Well, in that vein, I think our next question actually is somewhat related to this. So if you don't mind me continuing, or you're continuing, Hayaatun, I wonder if you have, so the next audience question is about this idea of like, do you have techniques or methods to fully acknowledge and identify who might be missing from a room or from a conversation, perhaps, because these don't always happen in rooms, right? And if you have a way of kind of seeing a voice that might be missing, is there a preferred way to kind of approach those persons and perhaps kind of bring them in? And I'll try not to read too much into this question, but I wonder if part of the question that's being asked is perhaps like, what are authentic ways of bringing people into kind of decision making, into leadership, into work, into science, that avoid kind of tropes of tokenism?
Mm-hmm. Wow. It's a huge and massively important set of questions. Yeah. It's difficult to kind of boil it down to just one or two things. I mean, I would say that if I draw on a couple of principles that we use heavily in engineering, hopefully they'll resonate beyond engineering. So one is systems mapping. So you know, understanding the set of interventions that interact, the interdependencies, points of leverage, which stakeholders are involved in influencing each of those, is a really good way of just building that overarching picture of who is part of this system, because that can then prompt a secondary discussion about what role should they be playing in the design of that system, or in the way that we're going to evolve this system. So that's quite a generic approach. There are multiple tools out there that can help with systems mapping. I wouldn't want to endorse any particular one, but I think, you know, that's a really simple technique that will get you to at least, you know, kind of base level, if nothing else. I also think that, oh, sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback here. I also think that there are some good principles around good engineering design requires you to engage with end users. And if you take that same premise and think about research design, you think about the design of some institutional systems, you cannot produce a successful engineering system, product, service unless you have really understood end users and understood their feedback on your prototype and on your, you know, designs. So that is something that certainly we are used to practicing. I just don't think we've necessarily had that same discipline when it comes to how we take forward EDI initiatives. So I would say those are a couple of practical ways of looking at it. And in terms of reaching people who are not already in the room, I think, you know, the kind of the starting point has to be that we are the ones that need to figure out what's the barrier. Why are these people not feeling connected with us? And we need to get out of our offices and engage with these different groups where they're hanging out, and to recognize that, you know, we're the newcomers to this, but there are probably a multitude of organizations that have been working with these different groups. And by plugging into those groups, we get the opportunity to learn a lot more about what the real barriers are. So networks, there are so many networks out there. I mean, you know, a regular conversation I will have is, well, we just don't get applicants from these groups coming forward. I bet your bottom dollar there is a group out there, a network out there that has all these people that you want already talking to each other. They're just not talking to you. You're not talking to them. So I think, you know, that is a thing that is not nearly as hard as people feel. And I've seen a lot more proactivity in the UK, certainly following the Black Lives Matter, for example, to access groups around race and ethnicity. We've got a fantastic organisation in the UK called the Association for Black and Minority Ethnic Engineers UK, a grassroots organisation, done amazing things, and at last, funders and sponsors, recruiters are coming to them to say, oh, actually, we think you might have something we're interested in. Whereas for years, you know, AFB have been kind of knocking on the door going, hello, and everyone's been going, yeah, thank you very much, not for us. So I think, you know, let's just get off our backsides and get out there.
I think that's just so brilliant, and especially resonates, I think, in terms of, you know, some of the real disparities we see in health and science, healthcare, right? That lack of engagement of those important communities, and then we kind of wonder why our systems aren't supporting those individuals, right? Like, so I love those practical, very kind of tangible things we can do. Kimberly, I'd like to come to you for another audience question, and then I do have one final question for you both, as I mentioned. So unfortunately, I think this will be our last audience question. Time is just flying by this morning. But Kimberly, there's this audience question about how do we encourage diversity of thought in our organizations or in our activities or meetings, in our teams, and the teams that we work in, if our organizations themselves might lack actual diversity. Wondering if you have thoughts about this question.
Sure. I mean, I think whether or not you actually have structural diversity, you can be mindful of equity and inclusion related issues. So I think there's a lot to be said for thinking about, you know, you want to encourage diversity of thought. How am I engaging in inclusive practice that allows folks to think outside of the box, to say something that may not be perceived as popular or mainstream, and for that to be treated favorably. So if I think about even how we often run meetings, right? We're communicating information, we may ask for feedback, we're not necessarily terribly intentional. We might be like, well, does anybody else have questions? Yes? No? Okay, let's keep moving forward. To think strategically and intentionally about how am I creating space for everybody to share an idea? Am I going to ask everybody to write down an idea and turn it over, and then one by one reveal their idea? So we actually do engage everybody's idea. Do I collect ideas before the meeting, so I actually know what the thoughts look like in the room, and then maybe I can invite folks into the conversation who maybe don't tend to share their ideas as much because they might be shy, or they perceive themselves as maybe a little lower in the hierarchy, and people aren't necessarily going to listen to them in the same way. So I think being intentional about how we create inclusion in those spaces that encourage folks to share their thoughts is one thing, and also encouraging us to think in terms of diversity of thought. So how are we encouraging everyone to engage maybe around ideas that we're not all familiar with, listening to podcasts, watching short videos, reading short articles that kind of push our thinking that maybe are outside of the mainstream approaches to the ways that we attack problems, and just encouraging us all to think outside the box with intention as opposed to hoping it happens.
Okay, so final question for you both.
Sure.
I shouldn't build it up too much. It'll be like, expectation setting. I think it's a fun question, but I think it's important. How do we bring the creativity and joy to this work? I really want to hear from you two about how you bring joy into this work that you do, or when you're feeling perhaps discouraged, which happens, I think, to all of us. I think that that joy and creativity is a huge part of the sustaining change in DEI. And this is a question I have for a lot of DEI leaders. And so I want to ask it of you two as well. How do you find joy? How do you find creativity? What inspires you to keep going in this kind of work?
Oh, goodness. I will say a couple of things. First, I have a little person who's 3.5, and thinking about the world that I want him to be a part of keeps me motivated, brings me great joy. I hope that the world that I am hopefully making positive contributions to and promoting equity in higher education more generally will make a better learning environment for him and for his friends. So I think that brings me purpose. He brings me joy, but it brings me a sense of purpose in doing this work, and seeing how inspired and excited folks get around the work, seeing what it means to actually create a more inclusive environment and how people wake up and engage each other differently, and a fundamental belief that when you invest in people, when you create inclusive environments, that ultimately translates to diversity, excellence, the best work. That brings me a sense of joy, and brings me a sense of motivation. Creativity, I think I assume that I don't have all of the right answers. And I know I don't have all of the right answers. I need to talk to people, and I need to go beyond just reading leadership literature, change literature, that I get creative solutions to problems by just being in the world and reading novels and watching television, that we can't just always steep ourselves in the scholarship of the work, that the best ideas come when you step away from the work and you're able to make connections in the world for what you're trying to do in local spaces. So I think that's the answer for me.
I'm going to jump straight in and say, because I know we're running out of time, everything Kimberly said. But for me, there is joy in feeling like I can leverage the position I have, the privilege I have, the life experience I have to be part of positive change. And that is a privilege, right? That is something that is an honor, and that makes me happy. So that's the top line. And then in terms of creativity, I think, there's a question about what kinds of disruption can we do. I think we need to be so much braver about creativity. So, the Academy transformed its approach of trying to appeal to the next generation of young people to encourage them to consider a career in engineering by putting ourselves in the hands of digital marketing experts, right? Let's embrace other people's expertise and say, what do you do with this challenge? And let's learn from that and be excited by that. Other examples, we talked about VR, we could talk about, what happens if you just do random allocation, is that so scary? Let's give it a try, let's learn from it. What about the fact that, the majority of the population has already left full-time education. How can we give some of those people an opportunity to come into our world of research and innovation, career conversions, reskilling, upskilling? What is the bit of that that's going to change our world, diversify our world? And to me, these are such exhilarating prospects. I just want us to max out on their creativity. I think we're just scratching the surface, but
Yeah.
that's why it's exciting and uplifting. The prospect of all
Yeah.
that creativity ahead.
Yeah, perhaps even on a motorway, on a motorsport, right? I thought you were maybe going to go in that direction. I cannot thank our panelists enough, Dr. Sillem, Dr. Griffin. It's been an absolute joy to chat with you all today. To our audience members who have joined us from across the world, thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you found today's session to be meaningful, insightful. I hope that you've heard things that will benefit you in your work moving forward. And we thank you for all the work that you all are doing to help us advance equity and inclusion in your communities, in your workplaces, in your academic fields, in your industries. Thank you so much. And again, thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you to my whole team at AAAS and my colleagues at UKRI for helping us co-sponsor these fireside chats. The two fireside chats, the first of which was posted into the chat in case you'd like to check it out if you missed it. I see a couple of our previous speakers are already in the chat as well. This whole series of virtual fireside chats would not be possible without the hard work of a lot of incredible folks. And so I just want to thank our teams who are off camera for their diligence and their efforts and their brilliance. So thank you again, and I wish you all a wonderful week.
Thank you, Travis. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. It's nice seeing everybody.
Nice to see you.